The Great Hall of the Galactic Coalition was filled with delegates from 17 different species. They had come from distant stars to discuss matters of trade, territory, and peace. The hall was built on a neutral world called Prime, a place where no species held power over another. For 1,000 years, this hall had kept the galaxy from falling into chaos. But on this day, something dark was brewing in the hearts of those who had grown too proud. High Commander of the Empire stood at the center of the speaking platform. He was tall and covered in thick green scales that caught the light whenever he moved. His eyes were narrow and yellow, and they burned with a hatred that he did not bother to hide. They were warriors. They had conquered 3-star systems through blood and fire, and they believed themselves to be the greatest fighters in the known galaxy. Pointed one clawed finger toward the human delegation sitting quietly in the eastern section of the hall. The humans looked small compared to most other species. They had no scales, no claws, no natural armor. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. Two, they looked like prey animals that had somehow stumbled into a gathering of predators. "These creatures have spread too far," declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Their colony ships appear in every sector. Their traders undercut our prices. Their explorers map territories that should belong to stronger peoples. I say we must act now, before these soft-skinned vermin grow too numerous to control." Many delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The humans had been members of the coalition for only 60 years, a very short time by galactic standards. But in that time, they had proven themselves to be peaceful traders and curious explorers. They had never started a war. They had never threatened another species. Most delegates saw no reason to fear them, but saw their rapid expansion as a threat to dominance. He saw their kindness as weakness and their diplomacy as cowardice. He wanted to crush them before they could become a true power in the galaxy. In the shadows of the observation gallery above the main floor, an ancient being watched the proceedings with growing fear. Her name was S, and she belonged to a species called they were among the oldest races in the coalition. They lived for many centuries, and their memories stretched back to times that younger species knew only from history books. S had pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Her eyes were large and luminescent, capable of seeing things that others could not. She was over 400 years old, and she had witnessed events that still haunted her dreams. When the assembly broke for a rest period, S moved quickly through the corridors until she found speaking with his advisors. She approached him without hesitation, her old bones carrying her forward with desperate purpose. "High Commander, I must speak with you," she said. "It is a matter of great importance." Turned to look at her with barely hidden contempt. They were known as philosophers and record keepers, not warriors. He saw no reason to respect this frail old creature. "Speak quickly then," he said. "I have plans to make." S stepped closer and lowered her voice so that only could hear her words. "You must not attack the humans. I am begging you to listen to me. If you strike against them, you will bring destruction upon your entire empire." Let out a harsh laugh that sounded like stones grinding together. "You fear these weak little beings. Look at them. They have no natural weapons. Their bodies are fragile. A single warrior could kill 10 of them without breaking a sweat." "You see only what is on the surface," S replied. "I have seen what lies beneath. 60 years ago, I was present when a species called the attacked a human colony on a world called Seven. Do you know what happened to the—" "I have never heard of them," admitted. "Exactly." S let that single word hang in the air for a moment. "They were raiders. They were cruel and powerful. They attacked the human colony without warning and killed everyone they found. Men, women, children. They burned the settlements and took whatever they wanted. They believed the humans would be easy victims." Shrugged his massive shoulders. "And the humans surrendered. They paid tribute to avoid further attacks." "No." S gripped the High Commander's arm with surprising strength. Her luminescent eyes bore into his with an intensity that made even him feel uncomfortable. The humans did something that no species had ever done before. They did not ask for peace. They did not negotiate for their dead. They did not retreat to protect their remaining colonies. Instead, they gathered every ship they had and they began to hunt. Hunt. They chased the across 4 star systems for 11 years, every single ship, every hidden base, every colony where families lived. They tried to run. They abandoned their territories and their wealth. They scattered to the farthest corners of the galaxy. They sent messages begging for mercy. They offered to return everything they had stolen. They promised to never attack again. S paused and took a shaky breath. The memories were painful even after all these years. The humans ignored every offer. They hunted thee until there were none left, not defeated, High Commander, not conquered, extinct. An entire species wiped from existence because they made the mistake of attacking human families. Pulled his arm free and stepped back. You tell me fairy tales meant to frighten hatchlings. The humans are weak. Everyone can see this. I watched it happen with my own eyes, S said. I saw human ships chase vessels into asteroid fields and nebulae where no sane pilot would go. I saw human soldiers fight with wounds that would have killed warriors of any other species. They would not stop. They could not be reasoned with. They had decided that they would pay the ultimate price, and nothing in the universe could change their minds. She reached out one last time, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. The humans told us they were sending a message to the galaxy. They said that anyone who attacked their families would face the same fate. Do not attack them, because once you do, they will never let you flee. They will chase you to the end of the universe and beyond. They will hunt your children and your children's children. They will not stop until your species exists only in memory. Stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. He did not believe her. He could not believe that such soft and fragile creatures could pose any real threat to the mighty empire. 3 days later, ordered his war fleet of 200 ships to attack the human colony of New Portland. He expected an easy victory that would establish dominance over the outer territories. He had no idea that he had just sealed the fate of his entire species. The humans would soon wake from their peaceful slumber, and when they did, the galaxy would learn why some warnings should never be ignored. The attack came at dawn. The people of New Portland were just beginning their morning routines when the sky turned red with weapons fire. 200 warships emerged from hyperspace without any warning, their cannons already glowing with deadly energy. They did not send a message demanding surrender. They did not give the colonists time to evacuate. They simply began to destroy everything in sight. New Portland was a peaceful colony of 40,000 people. There were farmers who grew food for nearby systems. There were scientists who studied the local wildlife. There were teachers and doctors and engineers who had come to build a new life on a distant world. None of them had ever held a weapon. None of them had ever harmed anyone. They did not care. High Commander had given orders to show no mercy. He wanted to send a message to humanity that they were not welcome in territory. He believed that a show of overwhelming force would make the humans retreat to their own systems and never challenge his empire again. Admiral Jack was on routine patrol 2 star systems away when the distress signal reached his ship. The USS Relentless was a battle cruiser, one of the finest vessels in the human fleet. Jack had commanded her for 12 years, through countless missions along the frontier. He was a steady man with gray eyes and a calm voice that never wavered even in the worst situations. But when Communications Officer Lisa Grant read out the message from New Portland, something changed in those gray eyes. A cold fire began to burn there, something that his crew had never seen before. "Admiral, the fleet is bombarding civilian sectors," Lisa said, her voice shaking as data streamed across her screen. "They are targeting homes and schools. The colony defense force was destroyed in the first 5 minutes. There are reports of ground troops landing in the main settlement." Jack's hands tightened on the arms of his command chair. His younger sister lived on New Portland with her husband and 2 children. He had received a message from her just last week, telling him about his nephew's birthday party. "How long to reach them?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. Tactical Officer Sam Briggs ran the calculations with trembling fingers. Sam was a veteran of 30 years in the fleet. He had seen combat against pirates and raiders more times than he could count, but he had never seen anything like this. An unprovoked attack on a civilian colony was something that simply did not happen in the modern galaxy. 14 hours at maximum burn, sir, Sam reported. By the time we arrive, the bombardment will be over. There may not be anyone left to save. Jack closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, the cold fire had spread across his entire face. He turned to Lisa with an expression that made her lean back in her seat. "Get me Fleet Command. Priority 1 emergency channel. Then contact every human ship within 20 light years. I want all of them moving toward New Portland within the hour." The message that went out from the USS Relentless that morning would be remembered for generations. It spread through human space like a wave of fire, reaching colony worlds and space stations and ships in the deepest regions of explored territory. The message was simple. One of their worlds had been attacked. Civilians had been murdered. Children had been killed. Within 6 hours, the entire human fleet was mobilizing. Ships that had been on peaceful exploration missions turned toward the combat zone. Vessels that had been undergoing repairs rushed to complete their work and launch. Retired officers came out of their comfortable homes and reported for duty. No one had to be ordered. No one had to be convinced. They simply heard what had happened and they knew what needed to be done. On Earth, President Daniel called an emergency session of the United Colonial Assembly. The assembly chamber was packed with representatives from every human world, their faces grim as they waited to hear what their leader would say. The cameras were broadcasting to billions of people across dozens of star systems. Daniel was not a military man. He had spent his career as a diplomat and peacemaker. He had always believed that conflicts could be resolved through talking and understanding. But as he stood before the assembly that day, something hard and unyielding had settled into his features. "The Empire has committed an act of war against humanity," he began, his voice steady but carrying an edge that cut through the silence like a blade. 40,000 of our citizens have been subjected to an unprovoked military assault. We have received reports of atrocities that I will not describe in this chamber out of respect for the families of the victims. He paused and looked directly into the cameras, knowing that his next words would be heard by every human being alive and by every species in the coalition. "We did not seek this conflict. We have never desired conquest or empire. We came to the stars to explore and to trade and to build a better future for our children. But let me be absolutely clear about what happens next." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes burning with a quiet intensity that made even the most powerful representatives shift in their seats. "To the leadership of the Empire, I offer one opportunity for peace. You will withdraw all forces from human territory immediately. You will surrender every individual responsible for planning and executing this attack. You will provide full compensation to the survivors of New Portland. You have 72 hours to comply with these terms." He straightened and took a deep breath. "If these terms are not met, there will be no further negotiation. There will be no ceasefire. There will be no second chances. We will come for you with everything we have. We will pursue you across every star system and every galaxy if necessary. And we will remind the universe why humanity should never be awakened to war." Broadcast ended. Across human space, people watched in silence as they absorbed what their president had just promised. Some wept for the dead of New Portland. Others felt a cold determination settling into their hearts. All of them understood that something fundamental had changed. The peaceful traders and curious explorers were gone. In their place stood something older and darker, something that had slumbered in human hearts since the days when their ancestors had fought with stone tools and fire. High Commander received a copy of the broadcast on his flagship. He watched it with his advisors gathered around him, and when it ended, he laughed. "Listen to this frightened creature making threats," he said with contempt. "The humans are trying to scare us with words because they know they cannot fight us. Continue the bombardment. Let them see that they do not bow to empty threats." His advisors laughed with him. None of them noticed the young communications officer in the corner who had grown very pale. That officer had studied human history as a hobby. He knew things about these soft-skinned beings that his commanders did not. He knew that humans always kept their promises. 72 hours passed. They did not withdraw, and deep in space, the human fleet began to move. The hunt was about to begin. The human counterattack did not come the way anyone expected. High Commander had pulled most of his fleet back to creating a massive defensive formation around his most important planet. He expected the humans to come straight at him in a desperate charge. He planned to crush them with superior numbers and firepower, then dictate terms of surrender to whatever remained of their pathetic species. But the humans did not come to Instead, they went everywhere else. Captain Peters was 34 years old and had served in the fleet for 12 years. He commanded a destroyer called the USS Persistence, a fast and deadly ship designed for hit-and-run attacks. When the war orders came through, he gathered his crew and explained what they were about to do. "We are not going to fight the main fleet," he told them. "We are going to take away everything that makes their fleet possible, their shipyards, their fuel stations, their supply depots, their communication relays. By the time we are finished, their warships will be floating in space with empty fuel tanks and broken equipment, unable to fight or flee." The attack on Station was the first major blow. Was the largest shipyard, a massive structure orbiting a gas giant where new warships were built and damaged ones were repaired. It was defended by a network of weapons platforms and sensor systems that were supposed to detect any approaching threat. Led his squadron of 12 destroyers through a gap in the sensor net that should have been impossible to find. Human intelligence officers had been mapping defenses for years, not because they planned to attack, but because humans always believed in being prepared. They had spent decades quietly watching and recording, building a complete picture of every weakness in the military structure. Now that preparation became a weapon. The attack lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, Station was a field of burning wreckage. 12 ships under construction were destroyed. Fuel reserves that would have powered the fleet for 6 months were gone. The workers and engineers who knew how to build warships were dead or captured. And the humans did not stop there. Within 2 weeks, similar attacks struck across space. Fuel depots exploded in the night. Communication stations went silent one by one. Transport ships carrying supplies to the front lines vanished without a trace. The mighty war machine began to starve. Screamed at his admirals to find the human fleet and destroy it. But the humans were never where he expected them to be. They struck from unexpected directions, used paths through space that they had thought were impossible to navigate, and disappeared before any response could be organized. It was like trying to fight shadows. While the fleet operations continued, Commander Kate led the ground forces that returned to New Portland. Kate was a small woman with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much in her years of service. She had hoped that the reports about the colony were exaggerated. She had prayed that some survivors would be found hiding in bunkers or shelters. What she found was worse than anything she had imagined. They had not simply attacked the colony. They had done things that Kate could not describe without feeling sick. Bodies of civilians lay in the streets where they had been cut down while trying to flee. Buildings had been burned with people still inside. The evidence showed that the soldiers had taken their time, had enjoyed what they were doing. Kate stood in the ruins of what had been a school and felt something inside her go cold and hard. Around her, Soldiers who had seen combat on a dozen worlds were weeping openly. Others stood in silence, their faces like stone. "Get images of everything," Kate ordered her communications officer. Her voice was steady, but there was something in it that made everyone around her stand. Every piece of evidence, every body, every atrocity. Send it to every ship in the fleet. Send it to Earth. Send it to every human world. Everyone needs to see what we are fighting. The images spread through human space within hours. People who had been uncertain about the war suddenly understood what kind of enemy they faced. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Factories that had been producing civilian goods switched to military production. The entire human civilization transformed itself into a weapon aimed at a single target. On Prime, S watched the reports with a heavy heart. She had tried to warn them. She had begged to listen. Now all she could do was witness the tragedy that unfolded. The ambassador burst into her quarters one evening, his scales pale and his eyes wild with fear. He had lost weight since the war began. The proud warrior race was learning what it felt like to be prey. "You must help us," he pleaded. "You have connections with the humans. You must convince them to negotiate. We have offered to return all territories we took. We have offered trade agreements worth billions. We have offered everything we can think of." S looked at him with ancient, tired eyes. "What did they say?" "They said nothing. They do not respond to our messages. Their ships attack without warning and leave without speaking. It is as if they do not see us as worth talking to." S nodded slowly. This was exactly what she had feared. "They do not want your territory, ambassador. They do not want your trade goods or your wealth." "Then what do they want? What can we give them to make this stop?" S was silent for a long moment. How could she explain it to someone who had never understood humans? How could she make him see what his people had awakened? "They want you to understand," she finally said. "They want every species in the galaxy to understand what happens when you attack human families. They want to make sure that no one ever makes the same mistake again." "We understand. We have learned our lesson. Please tell them we understand." S shook her head sadly. "It is too late for that. The humans do not fight to win, ambassador. They fight until the fight is over, and they are the ones who decide when that is. Not you, not me, not anyone." The ambassador left without another word. He knew she was right. They had started a war they could not finish. Now they could only wait and see how far the humans would take it. The answer, he would soon learn, was farther than anyone could have imagined. By the third month of the war, the Empire was falling apart. Their mighty fleet had been cut down to less than a third of its original size. Their supply lines were destroyed. Their shipyards were burning ruins. Their soldiers were hungry and exhausted and terrified of an enemy they could not seem to hit. High Commander no longer spoke of victory. He no longer laughed at human threats. Now he spent his days staring at star maps, searching for somewhere to hide. There was no longer safe. Human strike forces had begun attacking the outer defense stations, picking them off one by one with careful precision. It was only a matter of time before they broke through to the planet itself. Knew that if he stayed, he would die. His entire species might die with him. "Set course for the void territories," he ordered from the bridge of his flagship, the last great dreadnought left in the fleet. The ship was called the Conqueror, a name that now seemed like a cruel joke. The humans have never explored that region. The radiation storms and gravity wells make navigation almost impossible. We can hide there and rebuild." His navigation officer looked up with hollow eyes. Young had once been eager for war, filled with dreams of glory and conquest. Now he looked like an old man, worn down by months of running and dying. "High Commander, the void territories are dangerous even for us. Many ships will be lost just trying to reach them. And if we do survive, how will we rebuild? We have no shipyards, no factories, no resources." "Better to die trying than to wait here for the humans to find us," replied. There was no pride left in his voice, only fear. At least in the void we might have a chance. Here we have none. The remnants of the fleet gathered and fled into the unknown. 63 ships carrying the last hope of an empire, running from an enemy they had once mocked as weak and harmless. But the humans were watching. Lieutenant Commander Amy commanded a scout ship called the Horizon. Her vessel was small and fast, designed for long-range reconnaissance missions that could last for months. Amy was 29 years old with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She had lost friends on New Portland. She had seen the images of what they had done. When she received orders to track the fleeing enemy fleet, she gathered her crew of 12 and spoke to them honestly. "They think they can run far enough to escape justice," she said. "They are wrong. Our job is to follow them wherever they go and report their position to the main fleet. We do not engage. We do not reveal ourselves. We just watch and wait and make sure they never disappear." The Horizon followed the Into the Void territories, navigating the same dangerous paths that the enemy fleet was taking. Amy lost 2 crew members when a radiation storm caught them by surprise. She held a brief memorial service and continued the pursuit. Nothing would stop her. Every few days, she sent a coded message back to Fleet Command with the position. And every time she sent that message, she knew that human ships were adjusting their course to follow. They fled deeper into the void. They passed through regions of space where no ship had ever traveled. They lost vessels to gravity wells and asteroid impacts and systems failures caused by the harsh environment. But still they ran, hoping that distance would save them. It did not. Human ships began appearing in the void territories within weeks. Supply ships established hidden bases. Scout vessels mapped the dangerous regions. Warships took up positions along the routes they might use. The humans built a net in the darkness of unknown space, and they flew deeper into it with every passing day. While the military hunt continued, a different kind of battle was being fought on neutral ground. On a coalition world far from the fighting, a young diplomat named Saris approached the human embassy with a desperate hope. Saris had opposed the war from the beginning. She had argued against attacking the humans, had warned that it would bring disaster. No one had listened to her. Now she was trying to save what she could of her people. Benjamin Cole was the human ambassador to the coalition. He was an older man with white hair and a tired face. He had spent his career building bridges between species, finding common ground where others saw only differences. The war had broken something in him. He still did his job, but there was a heaviness in his movements that had not been there before. Saris met him in a small conference room with no windows. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "Ambassador Cole, I am here to speak for the civilians," she said through her translator. "There are millions of my people who had no part in the attack on your colony, children who never held a weapon, scholars who spend their lives studying ancient texts, workers who know nothing of war. Surely your people can see the difference between them and the military leaders who caused this tragedy." Ben looked at her for a long moment before responding. His voice was calm, but carried a weight of sadness that Saris had not expected. "We are not monsters, Ambassador Saris. We do not target civilians. We never have and we never will." He paused and took a breath. "But we will pursue your military forces until there is nothing left to pursue. We will destroy every facility that could ever be used to threaten our people again. And we will hold every individual responsible for New Portland accountable for what they did. And if High Commander surrenders, if he gives himself up for trial, then the war ends immediately. Your people return to you rebuild under coalition supervision. Life goes on." Ben's face hardened slightly. "But he will not surrender. I have studied your High Commander. He would rather watch his entire species suffer than face justice for his crimes." Saris lowered her head. She knew the ambassador was right, was too proud to surrender. He would run until there was nowhere left to run. "Is there nothing I can do?" she asked quietly. Ben leaned forward, and for a moment, some warmth returned to his tired eyes. "Keep talking to us. Keep reminding us that not all are the same. When this war ends, your people will need leaders who can help them find a new path. Be ready for that day." Saris nodded and left the embassy. Behind her, Ben Cole sat alone in the conference room, staring at the wall. He wondered how many more would die before finally accepted the truth. The humans would never stop. They would follow to the end of the universe if they had to. There was no sanctuary far enough to escape their justice. The war lasted 11 months. By its end, the Empire had ceased to exist. The final battle took place in a nameless star system at the very edge of explored space. They had run as far as they could run. They had fled through radiation storms and gravity wells in regions of space where stars were dying. They had lost ship after ship to the dangers of the void, and still the humans followed them. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror, and watched his sensor screens with dead eyes. Around him, his officers moved like ghosts, going through the motions of their duties without hope or energy. They had been running for months. They were exhausted and starving and broken in spirit. 17 ships remained. 17 vessels out of the 200 that had attacked New Portland with such confidence just a year before. Most of them were damaged. All of them were low on fuel and ammunition. They had nothing left to fight with. "High Commander," his communications officer said quietly. "Human fleet detected, coming out of hyperspace on all sides." Looked at the sensor display and felt something inside him finally break. The humans had brought over 300 ships to this forgotten corner of the galaxy, not because they needed such overwhelming numbers to defeat his pathetic fleet. They had brought this many ships because every captain in the human navy had volunteered to be present at the end. Admiral Jack commanded the human forces from the bridge of the USS Relentless. It was the same ship that had received the first distress call from New Portland, the same ship that had begun the hunt. Jack had led the pursuit from the beginning, and he intended to see it through to the end. He thought about his sister as he watched the ships on his screens. She had not survived the attack. Neither had her husband or her children. Jack had seen the images of what had been done to them. He had carried that knowledge in his heart through every battle, every chase, every long night of wondering if they would ever find the enemy. Now finally, it was almost over. "This is Admiral to all vessels," Jack broadcast on every frequency. "You are surrounded and, High Commander, you are personally charged with war crimes against humanity. Surrender yourself and your command staff, and your remaining crews will be treated fairly under coalition law." There was silence for a long moment. Then a voice came back, weak and trembling. "Admiral, this is Lieutenant of the Navy. High Commander is dead. He took his own life 1 hour ago rather than face capture." There was a pause, and when spoke again, his voice broke with emotion. "We surrender unconditionally. Please, please let this end." Jack closed his eyes. Part of him had wanted to face trial. He had imagined watching the High Commander stand before the families of New Portland and explain why he had ordered the death of innocent civilians. He had wanted justice in the formal sense, with courts and judges, and a sentence delivered according to law. But another part of him understood that this ending was its own kind of justice, had been so proud. He had started a war because he could not stand to share the stars with creatures he considered beneath him. Now he had died alone and afraid in a nameless system, having watched his empire collapse around him. He had died knowing that everything he had built was gone, and that his name would be remembered only as a warning to others. "All ships hold fire," Jack ordered. "Prepare to receive prisoners." The aftermath of the war reshaped the galaxy for generations. The people who survived were returned to there and placed under strict supervision. They were forbidden from building warships or maintaining any military force beyond basic planetary defense. Some of them eventually found new purpose as traders and scholars, joining the coalition as peaceful members. Others carried bitterness in their hearts until the day they died. The young diplomat Saris became one of the first leaders of the reformed society. She worked tirelessly to rebuild her people, to help them understand what had happened and why, and to ensure that they never made the same mistakes again. The humans worked with her, offering aid and guidance without hatred or cruelty. They had achieved justice. They had no interest in revenge. A new amendment was added to the coalition charter, named the Doctrine after the admiral who had led the human response. It stated simply that any unprovoked attack on civilian populations would be met with total military response until complete accountability was achieved. No exceptions, no negotiations. No species ever tested the doctrine. Years passed, then decades. The war became history, then legend, then something that young races learned about in their first lessons about galactic politics. And through all those years, one name became synonymous with the warning itself. S lived for another century after the war. The ancient spent her final years as one of the most respected advisors in the coalition, sought out by diplomats and leaders from 100 worlds. She had tried to prevent the tragedy before it happened. Now she dedicated herself to making sure it never happened again. One day, a young diplomat from a newly spacefaring species came to her seeking advice. His people had just made first contact and were preparing to join the galactic community. He wanted to know what lessons he should carry with him. S looked at him with her luminescent eyes, seeing echoes of all the young races that had come before. Be peaceful, she told him. Be fair in your dealings. Trade honestly and honor every agreement you make. The galaxy rewards those who can be trusted. And if there are conflicts, the young diplomat asked, if we have disputes with other species, then you negotiate, you compromise, you find solutions that allow everyone to live with dignity. She paused, and something shifted in her ancient face. But there is one thing you must never do, young one. No matter what grievances you may have, no matter what pride or ambition pushes you forward. What is that? Never attack the humans. The young diplomat looked surprised. He had met humans during his journey to the coalition. They had seemed friendly and curious, eager to learn about his culture and share their own. They had shown him pictures of their families and talked about their hopes for the future. But they seem so kind, he said, so welcoming. They are, S agreed. They are wonderful friends and valuable partners. They will help you in times of need without asking for anything in return. They will celebrate your successes as if they were their own. She leaned forward, her voice dropping low. But if you mistake that kindness for weakness, if you attack their families and their homes, then you will discover what they discovered. What is that? S looked at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall, that had witnessed the extinction of species who had made the wrong choice. That the humans will chase you across the stars, that they will follow you into the darkest corners of the universe, that they will never stop, never rest, never accept anything less than complete justice. She took a slow breath. Do not attack the humans, young one, because once you do, they will never let you flee. The young diplomat nodded slowly, committing every word to memory. He would carry that warning back to his people. He would make sure they understood. And somewhere across the galaxy, on a green and blue world called Earth, humanity continued to live in peace. They explored new stars. They built new colonies. They made friends with new species. They were kind and curious and full of hope for the future. But deep in their hearts they remembered. They always remembered. And they always would.